Woke currently means identity, politics, moral worldview. But that's not what the word actually originally means. White liberals appropriated this word from black culture. Even as early as 100 years ago, referring to waking up to injustice was part of the connotation. In 1971, it was published in a play, not even in the form of wake up, but in the word woke. It was in songs in 2008, and it wasn't until the movement itself of liberals appropriating the civil rights movement template of Black America that the word woke started getting co-opted by liberals. They take the template that's used by Black America in the civil rights movement, and they used it to push forward Obergefell, the ratification of gay marriage. And so it started in Black culture, and then we add on every conceivable permutation of sexuality. And then furthermore, we try to shoehorn in, by the way, climate change. This is why it's impossible for liberals to define the word, but I think that we just defined it in the first few seconds of this video. Identity, politics, moral worldview. You determine what is moral based on identity politics. Identity politics has roots in cultural Marxism. It just basically divides everybody with these hard lines and then kind of foments hatred among them. We saw it kind of come into the scene of academia with a published paper in 1989, gave rise to critical race theory, which is not taught in public schools, but it does influence public school curricula, gave rise to other curriculum movements that seek to completely reconstruct children's views of America, pointing to the sins of the founding fathers rather than the actual wording of our founding documentation, saying that we don't get our rights from a king, we get our rights from God, and nobody can take them away from us, and all men are created equal. This is the fruit of moral relativism. When you fire God as your moral compass, something else is going to take its place. All right, when you don't have any means by which to know where you really stand morally, you can replace that and make yourself feel like a moral person by way of a vegan diet, by way of adhering to climate change doctrine, by way of protesting at a rally that you don't really understand the origins of. You can consider yourself having once been asleep, but now you're awake to oppression. That's where the word actually comes from, but white liberals have completely appropriated it. I can see very clearly what it means, but Jenn Psaki cannot. All right. Jenn Psaki was former White House press secretary whose very job was to be bipartisan and neutral in issuing statements from the White House to the press corps and then answering questions from the press corps, again, in a completely neutral and nonpartisan fashion. And as a result, naturally, as soon as she is replaced in that role, she immediately goes to the most liberal news outlet in America, MSNBC. So here's our former press secretary weighing in on the nature of wokeness. You're going to see her not give a definition for wokeness. And in the very end of the video, which I'll link for context, she also then encourages everybody to let their woke flag fly.
With the recent news of Donald Trump's looming indictment, we've seen Trump's allies
Donald Trump
attack prosecutors in all sorts of ways. But one attack in particular stood out to me. On Thursday, Boris Epshteyn said that woke radical DAs in New York and Atlanta are to blame for Trump's legal problems. Yes, you heard that correctly. Woke DAs are to blame here.
It's not really what this text is totally about, the persecuting of President Trump. Yeah, I get that, but there's more to the quote as well that she conveniently omitted.
That attack stood out because it seems that blaming woke politics for problems big and small has become a one-size-fits-all response for Republicans lately. Take, for example, the news.
Okay, she might be onto something here. Like the great Thomas Sowell said,
I always believe that there have been pockets of sanity.
She could be right. It could be that conservative pundits are overusing this, but watch what she goes on to say.
This past week of the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, the largest bank failure since the 2008 financial crisis. It was a big deal, and it's a complicated issue, one that we could probably devote an entire show to. But for some Republicans, the real problem had no connection at all to any economic policies at all.
Eloquent.
This is really the first bank failure that was caused by adherence to woke beliefs and policies.
They were one of the most woke banks.
Lord knows what other left-wing romping was going on in these woke banks.
This bank, they're so concerned with DEI and politics and all kinds of stuff. I think that really diverted from them focusing on their core mission.
All right, DeSantis is actually onto something. The very first veto of the Biden presidency was to veto a rebuke set in place by the Trump administration. The Trump administration rebuked this movement that would encourage or invite fiduciaries to steer clients toward funds that were, frankly, by the liberal definition of the word, woke, right? Meaning that they had they hired a certain, according to certain racial quotas, that they did not invest in companies that were in, for example, the energy sector, because they don't want to contribute to climate change and things like that. So this movement, this motion was to really, frankly, cause fiduciaries to no longer function like fiduciaries. A fiduciary is somebody who is paid by their client to earn them money, and so they owe them a financial duty to earn profit. So if your investment bank is supposed to earn you profits, but they earn you profits plus trying to save the world, trying to rectify past wrongs, trying to solve racism, trying to solve climate change, then they're off task in that sense. They're no longer functioning, strictly speaking, as a fiduciary. That's what DeSantis was referencing right there.
So blaming the wokes or wokeness or wokeism has become a knee-jerk reaction for Republicans on any issue. Clearly, the term itself is a little bit ambiguous and has been subject to a lot of interpretation.
No, it's not ambiguous. It was very clear until about 2014, 2015, but then it spiked all the more in about 2020 or 2021.
Many Republicans have co-opted woke and increasingly used it to rally their base against.
Straight out of Saul Alinsky's playbook, accuse your opposition of doing the very thing that you're currently doing.
Political opponents. In a decidedly unscientific analysis, we found that mentions of the...
She calls her own analysis decidedly unscientific. And she shows no such analyses, by the way, for MSNBC or CNN or any other kind of liberal outlet. And we go from 339 to 1,022. So she's talking about how frequently the word comes up in conservatives' mouths. And I do believe that she may be onto something here. But a lot of this circulates around Joe Biden. Right, she shows how this coincides with when Joe Biden took office, and it's because Joe Biden himself has sort of run parallel to wokeness, because the word woke originally intended to describe an increased awareness in the Black community of injustices, started taking on a lot of white liberal causes over the years, and Joe Biden's career has run parallel to this. Here is Joe Biden in 2006. You can see the headline says that the Trump campaign blasted out this clip of Joe Biden. But what's funny is that when I searched for this clip, because I knew that it existed, I had seen it before. I knew he was on Meet the Press and came out in defense of traditional marriage, and then came out on the Meet the Press again later, endorsing same-sex marriage. But this happens to have come actually from a website that is dedicated to LGBTQIAAP+. Yes, that's the abbreviation we were told to use 2 years ago. Is directed at LGBTQ+ readers in Washington, D.C. So here's Biden in 2006.
Avian flu, we don't have enough vaccines, we don't have enough police officers, and we're going to debate the next 3
We don't have enough police officers.
weeks, I'm told. Gay marriage, a flag amendment, and God only knows what else. I can't believe the American people can't see through this. We already have a law, the Defense of Marriage Act, where we've all voted, not where I voted and others said, look, marriage is between a man and a woman, and states must respect that.
All right, so for full context, the link to this video is in the description to this video that you're watching now. So that is Joe Biden in 2006. Here he is in 2012. The same show, different host, 6 years later, different worldview, now going woke, as the word has morphed in its meaning among particularly white liberals.
What all marriages at their root are about, whether they're marriages of lesbians or gay men or heterosexuals.
Is that what you believe now?
That's what I believe.
And you're comfortable with same-sex marriage now?
Look, I am Vice President of the United States of America. The president sets the policy. I am.
All right, so he totally throws Obama under the bus. He'll go on in this video too to admit that it really has to do with whatever's in the cultural zeitgeist is what I'm going to believe. All right. By the way, he is a Catholic. Recently, and when I say recently, I mean like today. The word was kind of put out that he didn't have to evolve at all. Like, I've always been woke. That's the problem with being woke, right? Is that your tweets don't age well. If you believe in the Bible, there are no updates to the Bible that have not been, for thousands of years now. Right? So you can tweet a Bible verse this year and be proud of the fact, actually, that you did it 20 years from now, because God's not issuing any updates to Scripture. Yet, if you are woke, you better watch out, and you better go back and clean up your past social media feeds pretty quickly. So he threw Obama completely under the bus. And this was just over 2 years before the ratification of Obergefell, and even recently around the same time when he was in a debate against Sarah Palin in the vice presidential debate, when he was asked to avoid nuance, Senator, do you support gay marriage? Biden answered, no. All right. He was very clear on this. He was very plain about this, but then his modern day revisionist history assumes that he's always been in favor of gay marriage. For 36 years, the man was in the Senate and did nothing to posit gay marriage as ratification. He just voted against the Defense of Marriage Act. So he becomes increasingly woke. Or you see that how wokeness takes on the connotation of sexuality. It also even comes to take on climate change ideology. In Psaki's original video, which is linked below, you'll see more and more how anybody criticizing Silicon Valley Bank is just is calling them out for their wokeness and their wokeness alone. But I'll give a criticism. She omits, by the way, in this clip, any of the other previous any of the previous authorities acknowledging the fact that actually no, it was liberal policies that led to the collapse of our economy. When you function like a banana republic, you just might see record inflation, and the only way to counter that, the only way to deal with that, is through hiking up interest rates. Right? So I don't just blame their wokeness, right? Hiring based on tokenism, refusing to invest in the energy sector even though it's booming. I'll absolutely blame the current White House's economy. So sure, they failed fiscally. They failed as fiduciaries. They were encouraged to do something more than just earn money. But yeah, I think also the liberals' economy contributes immensely to this. So back to the definition for woke, National Review writer Dan McLaughlin gives a pretty helpful one. And I think even in this image right here, you could see something pretty profound. You can see like there's the Black Lives Matter flag and it is painted over the rainbow. This is what the gay community did. They appropriated Black culture. And even the Black Lives Matter movement, by the way, was admittedly run by self-described trained Marxists. All right, it's cultural Marxism implemented into a movement, and then they came under fire for using all of the donations to buy themselves multiple houses. So here's McLaughlin's definition for woke. It begins with this: woke ideology evaluates immutable identity group membership over the individual. And he's spot on. He would go on to say, woke ideology is revolutionary in arguing that its preferred hierarchies must supplant current hierarchies. He's right. We're going from one hierarchy to another hierarchy. All right. So this definition for woke will work for now, but what it fails to really address is the actual origins of the word. All right, we see the definitions for words changing all the time. When I was in high school, all right, the definition for travesty in reference to a Shakespearean play was one in which gender roles were reversed. Okay, now the word travesty doesn't mean that anymore, and we're not allowed to read Shakespeare in school anymore. Even a word that was invented within the context of liberal academia has changed. Performative used to mean efficacious words that are spoken with authority and have the power of the effect they proclaim. Right, as in, I now pronounce you husband and wife or man and wife, right? That's what the word used to mean. It no longer means that. So in the context of Psaki's video, which is linked below, and you can see more of it, she goes on to show further panels that just fail to define it. She even shows a clip of this poor conservative author who completely blanked when asked the simple question, what does woke mean? And then, to Psaki's credit, she's very charitable to this poor author for her momentary blanking, and then admits, yeah, it is hard to define. And then she will fail to define it herself, and then she will encourage people to let their undefined flags fly. Watch this.
It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
It's hard to explain. Just 2 cents from someone who has worked a few years in communications. If you can't explain it and people don't understand it in 15 seconds, it may not be the winning message you think it is. So everyone out there, it sounds like you can let your woke flag fly.
We don't know what it means. Let your ignorant flag fly. That is a terrible message. You should define it first. We're using the definition that you're giving us, and the definition is evolving. Here's my definition for it. It is identity, politics, moral worldview. You define what is moral based on identity politics, all right, rather than by God and his word and his law. This is a definition that I'll never be embarrassed of, and it's never going to shift, and it's never going to change. This is one of the beautiful things about the Christian worldview, is that it's the one true worldview, and it's never going to change. According to the Christian worldview, all of truth came by way of God's revelation, revelational epistemology. I don't have to worry about upcoming moral trends because God is the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. It's true that we now live in the New Testament and there was once the Old Testament, but it is Marcionism, a classic heresy, to say that God has changed his mind or his personality. Yes, I've read Dawkins. He's wrong about this. God takes sin just as seriously today as he did in the Old Testament. May we not mistake the abounding grace that comes from Christ's sacrifice on the cross for license to sin. God's moral law is absolute, and not one stroke of the pen will ever disappear from it. I know where morality comes from. It comes from the one and only true God. So woke currently means identity, politics, moral worldview, but it used to mean I was asleep to racial injustice and now I've woken up to it. Watch how this definition changes further. I'm Jesse Campbell. Thanks for tuning in today. If you would please like and subscribe. I'll see you next time.